My name's Jordan Miller, 34, and I spent 6 long hours driving through a blizzard to reach my childhood home in Maplewood, Vermont for Christmas Eve dinner. When I finally arrived, tired but full of hope, I found my usual seat at the family table had been given to Martha Jenkins, our kind neighbor. "She's all alone this year," my mom explained, waving her hand dismissively. "We thought you'd be fine sitting in the kitchen." I nodded. "Sure," I said. Then I watched them all laugh together while I ate by myself. Growing up as the middle child in the Miller family was never easy. From my earliest memories, it felt like my parents had plenty of love for everyone but me. My older sister Brooke was the golden child who could do no wrong. She always got first pick from her bedroom to college money. My younger brother, Caleb, wasn't as favored as Brooke, but he quickly learned to follow our parents' lead, which often left me feeling like the odd one out. Even after 34 years of this, I still desperately wanted their approval. It's funny how deeply those old childhood habits run. Even after moving to Denver, Colorado, and building a successful career as a financial advisor, I kept sending money home regularly. I paid half of my parents' house payment each month, covered their TV streaming services, and often helped with power bills when things were tight. I told myself I did it because I cared, but deep down, I knew I was still trying to buy the love and attention they seemed unwilling to give freely. My life in Denver was busy but rewarding. I'd recently been promoted at Summit Financial Group, where I managed investments for wealthy clients. The promotion came with a big pay raise, but also longer hours and more responsibility. My boyfriend, Liam, couldn't handle my drive and ended our 3-year relationship just 3 months ago. "You're never going to be happy, Jordan," he said during our last fight. "You're always chasing something just out of reach. A bigger promotion, more money, your family's approval. When is it enough?" His words stung because they held some truth. But I wasn't ready to give up on any of my goals, including having a real relationship with my family. That's why, even with limited vacation time, I insisted on driving home for Christmas instead of using my busy work schedule as an excuse. Getting ready for this Christmas visit took a lot of effort. I spent weekends shopping for the perfect gifts, determined that this year would be different. For my dad, I found a rare first edition book about American history that cost almost $1,000. For my mom, I bought a fancy purse she'd admired online but would never buy for herself. I got Brooke tickets to see her favorite band, and for Caleb, the newest video game system he couldn't afford as a student. These gifts were my peace offerings, my way of saying, "Notice me," without actually saying the words. I wrapped each one carefully with expensive paper and hand-tied bows. In the 2 weeks before Christmas, I worked 14-hour days to clear my schedule. My boss, Brenda, noticed the dark circles under my eyes. You could just send them presents. You don't have to drive all that way, especially with the weather looking bad," she said during our last meeting before the holiday. "It's tradition," I replied with a forced smile. "Besides, I haven't seen them since last Christmas." "Your choice," Brenda shrugged. "Just don't check your email while you're there. You need a real break." The weather forecast showed a big winter storm moving across the Midwest on Christmas Eve, but I was determined not to let it stop me. I texted my mom many times in the days leading up to my trip, confirming dinner time and asking if I could bring anything. Her replies were usually short: 6 p.m. dinner and no need to bring anything. In her last message, she mentioned, "We'll have a few extra guests this year," but didn't say more. I figured she meant the usual 1 or 2 neighbors who didn't have family nearby. This was normal for our Christmas gatherings, as my parents were proud of their hospitality. I left Denver at 7 a.m. on Christmas Eve, hoping to arrive with plenty of time to settle in before dinner. The first 2 hours of the drive were clear. I listened to Christmas music while mentally practicing the talks I hoped to have with my family. I imagined them being impressed by my promotion, asking about my life, and actually listening to my answers. By the third hour, the snow started. Light at first, then heavier and heavier until I could barely see 20 feet ahead. The 6-hour drive stretched out as I was forced to slow to 30 miles per hour in some parts. I called my mother twice to update her on my progress. "Don't worry if you can't make it," she said during our second call. Her tone was oddly hopeful. "Safety first." "I'll be there," I promised, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I might be a little late, but I'll make it." I stopped many times to clean off my windshield and grab coffee to stay awake. At a gas station in northern Kansas, I watched families rushing in and out, loaded with last-minute gifts and snacks for their celebrations. Everyone seemed so excited, so sure of their welcome. I envied their certainty. By the time I finally turned onto my parents' street in Maplewood, Vermont, I had been driving for almost 6 hours. It was nearly 5 p.m. and the sun had already set. The neighborhood was transformed by Christmas lights and decorations. Each house tried to be the most festive. My parents' home was simply decorated, as always, with a single string of colorful lights along the roof and a lit wreath on the front door. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my strength and putting on lipstick in the mirror. "This year will be different," I whispered to myself. The same hopeful thought I repeated every Christmas with new determination. I gathered the beautifully wrapped gifts from my trunk and headed toward the front door, ready to finally receive the warm welcome I had been driving toward all day. I knocked on the front door, my arms full of carefully wrapped packages and my overnight bag. After a minute of awkward waiting, I had to set everything down to turn the handle myself. The warmth of the house wrapped around me as I stepped inside, bringing with it the familiar smell of my mother's cooking mixed with cinnamon and pine from the Christmas tree. "Hello," I called out, stomping snow from my boots in the entryway. "I made it." My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a holiday dish towel. Her face showed slight surprise, as if she hadn't really expected me to arrive, despite our many talks about my trip. "Oh, Jordan, there you are," she said, glancing at the clock. "We were starting to think you might not make it after all." There was no hug, no sign of relief that I'd safely driven on dangerous roads for 6 hours. She didn't offer to help with my bags or packages, just turned back toward the kitchen saying, "Dinner's almost ready. You can put your things in your old room. We turned it into a home office, but the pull-out couch is made up." I stood there for a moment, the weight of the gifts suddenly feeling much heavier. From the dining room, I could hear laughter and conversation. Gathering myself, I quickly put my overnight bag in what used to be my bedroom, but was now clearly my father's space, with a large desk and computer taking up most of the room. The pull-out couch did indeed have sheets on it, but they looked quickly arranged, and there was no pillow. I went back to the entryway to get the gifts and place them under the tree in the living room, which was next to the dining room. As I arranged them with the other presents, I glanced into the dining room and froze. The table was beautifully set with my mother's best china, the kind saved for special times. Candlelight flickered across shiny silverware and crystal glasses. My father sat at the head of the table with Brooke to his right. My brother Caleb was there with his girlfriend, Mia. And sitting in what would always be my spot, directly to my father's left, was Martha Jenkins, our 60-something neighbor from 3 houses down. Martha was dressed for the occasion in a red sweater with a Christmas tree pin, her gray hair neatly styled. She was laughing at something my father said, completely at ease, as if she belonged there more than I did. I must have made some sound because my mother appeared beside me. "Oh, you've noticed our guest," she said. "Martha is alone this year since her daughter moved to Seattle. We couldn't let her spend Christmas by herself." I tried to keep my face calm. "That's nice of you. Where will I sit?" My mother's eyes darted around, avoiding mine. "We figured you could sit at the kitchen counter. It's just for one meal, and the table is really only set for 6. I glanced back at the dining room. There were indeed 6 place settings, as if they had planned all along not to include me. As if my being there was an inconvenience they hadn't bothered to prepare for. "I see," I said, my voice sounding far away to my own ears. My father finally noticed me standing there and called out, "Jordan, you made it through the storm. Good for you. We're just having some wine before dinner." He didn't get up or offer me a glass. Caleb gave me a brief wave while Brooke barely looked up from her phone. No one commented on my journey or asked how the roads were. "Why don't you help me finish up in the kitchen?" my mother suggested, already turning away. I followed her without a word, still trying to understand what was happening. In the kitchen, there was indeed a single place setting at the counter, facing the sink instead of the room. From this spot, I would be able to hear the dining room conversation, but would have to turn around to see anyone. "Don't make a scene," Caleb murmured as he came into the kitchen to refill his wine glass. "It's just one dinner, and Martha really doesn't have anyone else." "I'm not making a scene," I replied softly. "I just drove 6 hours to get here. That's all." "We know. You mentioned that already. But it's Christmas, so let's just be nice to everyone, okay?" From the dining room, I could hear Brooke's distant laugh, followed by Martha. "You have to tell Jordan that story about your cruise." But Martha didn't come to tell me any story, and no one seemed to notice or care. As I helped my mother finish preparing the meal, I found myself remembering other holidays and family gatherings. There was my college graduation, where my parents left early to attend Brooke's boyfriend's art show. There was my 20th birthday, which was overshadowed by Caleb's acceptance into graduate school. There were countless times when my achievements were met with distracted nods while others received excited celebration. A pattern appeared in these memories, one I had tried for years to deny. I was the reliable one, the one who would understand, the one who would make sacrifices. I was also the one who paid bills, who sent checks, who financially supported a family that couldn't seem to find room for me at their own table. "Can you bring out the green beans?" my mother asked, interrupting my thoughts. I picked up the serving dish, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. As I entered the dining room, the conversation quieted for a moment, before starting again like a TV show paused and then played. I set down the green beans and returned to the kitchen without a word, wondering why I kept trying so hard for people who seemed to barely notice I existed, let alone my efforts. Dinner was served, and true to the seating arrangement, I found myself sitting on a stool at the kitchen counter, eating my mother's roast beef from the good china while staring at the sink. From this position, I could hear everything happening in the dining room, but was effectively left out of participating. "This is delicious, Margaret," Martha said enthusiastically to my mother. "You've outdone yourself this year." "Thank you. I tried a new recipe for the glaze," my mother replied, clearly pleased. I had complimented her cooking too, but my words seemed to disappear into the air without being acknowledged. The conversation flowed easily among the diners. My father discussed local politics with Martha, who apparently shared his views. Brooke dominated much of the talk with stories about her marketing job and the important clients she was handling. Caleb and his girlfriend Mia discussed their plans for after his graduation. Not once did anyone ask me a question or try to include me in the conversation. It was as if the 6 feet separating the kitchen from the dining room was a huge gap that couldn't be crossed. I heard Martha say, "I brought a small Christmas pudding. It's not much, but it's my mother's recipe." "How thoughtful," my mother exclaimed. "We'll have it for dessert." Meanwhile, the expensive wines I had brought from a special Denver winery sat unopened on the counter beside me. The fancy chocolates I had carried through the snow remained in their gift bag, unmentioned and apparently unwanted. I picked at my food, my appetite shrinking with each burst of laughter from the dining room. At one point, I heard my name mentioned and perked up, only to hear Brooke saying, "Jordan can help her invest it, right, Jord? Since that's what she does all day, move rich people's money around." Before I could respond, the conversation had already moved on to Mia's student teaching position. As the main course ended, I heard discussions of plans that had been made without me. "So, for New Year's Eve, we thought we'd do a small gathering here," my father was telling Martha. "Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. You're welcome to join us, of course." "That sounds lovely," Martha replied. "My New Year's plans fell through when Olivia moved, so I'd be delighted to come." I hadn't been told about any New Year's gathering, even though I was supposedly family. I wondered if I would be expected to drive another 6 hours for that event, only to be seated at the kitchen counter again. "And don't forget about the ski trip in February," Caleb added. "Martha, you mentioned you used to ski. You should come with us to Pine Ridge Mountain." The ski trip had been my gift to the family last year, a weekend getaway I had organized and mostly paid for. Now they were casually inviting Martha while I sat not 10 feet away, uninvited and unacknowledged. "Jordan," my mother called from the dining room, "would you mind serving the dessert? There's apple pie on the counter and Martha's pudding in the refrigerator." I stood silently, collecting dessert plates and cutting the pie into neat slices. As I arranged Martha's pudding on a serving plate, Brooke wandered into the kitchen for more wine. "Playing kitchen help suits you," she remarked with a smirk. "Very domestic." I said nothing, focusing on my task as she returned to the dining room. I could feel something shifting inside me, a huge plate of emotion, slowly building pressure. I served dessert, placing each plate carefully before the diners, who barely looked up to thank me. As I set the last plate down, my father was deep in conversation with Martha about the community garden project she led. "We could really use someone with your financial expertise on the committee," Martha was saying to my father. "The grant applications are quite complex." "I'd be happy to look them over," he replied, "though Jordan is the real numbers person in the family. Too bad she's always so busy in Denver." It was the first time he had directly mentioned me all evening, and it wasn't even to me, but about me, as if I were a distant relative rather than his daughter standing right there. I returned to the kitchen and began washing dishes. The simple task gave my hands something to do while my mind raced. Through the window above the sink, I could see my reflection against the darkness outside, pale and unclear, like a ghost haunting its own life. In that moment, I remembered something my therapist, Dr. Lee, had said during our last session before the holidays. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop going where you're not valued. It's not selfish to require basic respect, Jordan. It's necessary. As I dried a serving platter, I mentally calculated how much money I had given my family over the past year alone. The house payment help totaled over $15,000. Utilities, streaming services, and random emergency requests added several thousand more. I had paid for Caleb's laptop for graduate school and covered the plumbing repairs on my parents' house last spring. All that financial support, and they couldn't even make space for me at the dinner table? I thought about my friends in Denver who had invited me to join their family's celebrations. Olivia had practically begged me to come to her family's house in Wisconsin. "They're loud and sometimes annoying, but they'll love you instantly, and there's always too much food," she'd promised. I had said no, determined to keep my family tradition. Now I stood alone in the kitchen, invisible to the people whose lives I helped pay for, and I felt something final snap into place. Quietly, I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked to the entryway closet. I got my coat and purse without saying anything or making a fuss. No one noticed as I slipped out the front door until the cold December night. The snow had stopped and the sky had cleared, showing a blanket of stars above the silent neighborhood. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the sharp winter air, feeling strangely light despite the heaviness of the evening. Then I walked to my car, brushed off the accumulated snow, and drove away from my parents' house without looking back. I drove aimlessly at first, with no real destination in mind.
The streets were mostly empty on Christmas Eve, with only an occasional car passing by, likely headed to family gatherings where they were actually wanted. After about 15 minutes of random turns, I found myself on the main road leading to downtown Maplewood. The Grand View Hotel stood lit up against the night sky, its lobby windows warm and inviting. On impulse, I pulled into the parking lot and went inside. "Do you have any rooms available for tonight?" I asked the receptionist, a young man wearing a Santa hat with his uniform. He looked surprised. "On Christmas Eve?" "Actually, yes. We had a cancellation about an hour ago. Family got stuck in Denver because of the weather." The irony wasn't lost on me. Someone who wanted to be here couldn't make it, while I, who had made it, no longer wanted to be here. "I'll take it," I said, sliding my credit card across the counter.
20 minutes later, I was settled in a comfortable room on the 8th floor with a view of the city's Christmas lights. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, trying to process the evening's events when my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Brooke. "Wow, can't handle being overlooked, huh? Real mature walking out on Christmas Eve." I stared at the message, feeling a rush of anger so intense it made my hand shake. My sister, who had everything handed to her our entire lives, was accusing me of being childish for finally standing up for myself. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Olivia. "Merry Christmas, stranger," she said when I answered. "Just checking in to see how the family visit is going." "It's not," I replied, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm at a hotel." "What? What happened?" The concern in her voice was immediate and genuine, something I hadn't heard from my own family in years. I explained the situation, from the 6-hour drive to being put at the kitchen counter to walking out unnoticed. "Those absolute jerks," Olivia said when I finished. "I'm so sorry, Jord. That's beyond disrespectful." "The worst part is, I don't think they even realize how hurtful it was," I said. "They're probably still sitting there having their perfect Christmas Eve with Martha, the neighbor, not even missing me." "So what are you going to do now?" she asked. I looked around the hotel room, which suddenly felt like a command center for whatever came next. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm done being taken for granted." After we hung up, I took off my coat and set up my laptop on the desk. I opened my banking app and went to the bill pay section, where I had all my family's regular payments scheduled. The house payment help was set to go out on the 1st of the month, just a week away. I clicked on the payment and selected Freeze. A warning popped up. "Are you sure you want to freeze this payment? The recipient will not receive funds until unfrozen." I hesitated for only a second before clicking Yes. Next, I went through the utility payments I had been making for my parents since they retired early without enough savings. Electric, gas, water, internet. I froze them all. Each click felt more powerful than the last. Finally, I logged into the streaming service account I paid for but rarely used. My family, however, used it constantly. The history showed they were currently watching the new Christmas movie they had been excited about all week. With a grim smile, I changed the password and logged out all devices. I imagined their movie suddenly cutting off mid-scene, their confusion turning to understanding when they couldn't log back in. The thought brought me a small bit of satisfaction. Almost immediately, my phone began to ring. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then came a text. "Something wrong with the TV. Can you fix it?" So that was it. They had noticed my absence only when it affected their entertainment. More texts followed quickly. "Dad, movie stopped working. Password isn't working either." "Mom, where did you go? Everything okay?" "Brooke, way to ruin Christmas Eve. Mom is upset now." "Caleb, what's going on? Did something happen?" I turned off notification sounds and set the phone aside. Opening my laptop again, I began to calculate exactly how much financial support I had provided to my family over the years. The total was huge, well into 6 figures. Money that could have gone toward my own home instead of paying for the house where I wasn't even welcome at the dinner table. Money that could have paid for vacations I never took because I was too busy working to support 2 households. Money that could have been invested for my own future instead of enabling my family's comfortable present. My phone lit up again with another call from my father. This time I answered. "The movie stopped,"
he said immediately, not bothering with a greeting. "We can't get back in." "I know," I replied calmly. "I changed the password." There was a pause. Then, "Why would you do that? We were all watching." "I noticed. That's apparently what it takes for you to notice I'm gone, interrupting your movie." Another pause. "Gone? Where did you go?" "I left over an hour ago, Dad. I walked right out the front door with my coat and no one even looked up." "We were busy with dinner and guests," he said defensively. "If you had said something—" "Like what?" I interrupted. "Excuse me, I don't want to sit at the kitchen counter like an unwanted extra while you all enjoy Christmas Eve dinner with the neighbor in my seat." "You're overreacting about the seating arrangement. It was just more practical to have Martha at the table since she's older. And I'm just the daughter who drove 6 hours through a blizzard to be there. The daughter who pays half your house payment and all your streaming services, which, by the way, I've canceled."
His tone changed immediately. "What do you mean canceled?" "I mean, I'm done, Dad. I'm done being your ATM while being treated like an afterthought. I've frozen all the payments. House payment help, utilities, everything. You and Mom and Brooke and Caleb need to figure out your finances without me from now on." "You can't do that," he sputtered. "We're counting on that money for the January payment." "You should have thought of that before you put me in the kitchen while giving my seat to Martha. This is about more than a seat at the table." I feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me felt justified by their concern, while another part recognized the manipulative undertone to some of the messages. They were worried, yes, but mostly about the money issues of my leaving. The voicemails had similar feelings, though my mother's voice, in the last one, sounded genuinely tearful. "Jordan, please call us. I don't understand what's happened, but we can talk about it. It's Christmas." I was about to check my emails when I noticed one text that stood out from the others. It wasn't from my immediate family, but from Martha Jenkins, the neighbor who had been given my seat. It had been sent at 10:05 p.m. "Jordan, this is Martha from next door. I've just learned about your mother's condition and realize you may not know. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Please call your brother when you can. Your family needs you now more than ever." My mother's condition? What condition? Confused and suddenly worried, I scrolled through my messages again, looking for any mention of my mother being ill. There was nothing clear, though looking back, some of Caleb's messages seemed to hint at something more. "This isn't just about you right now. There's more going on than you know. Mom really needs everyone to be supportive right now, not adding stress." With shaking hands, I called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. "Finally," he said, sounding exhausted. "Where are you?" "I'm at the Grandview Hotel." "Caleb, what's going on? Martha texted about Mom having a condition." There was a long pause, then a heavy sigh.
She wasn't supposed to tell you. None of us were. Mom made us promise. Tell me what, Caleb? What's wrong with Mom? My heart was racing now, fear replacing anger. She was diagnosed with breast cancer 6 weeks ago, stage 2. She starts chemotherapy next week. The news hit me like a physical blow. Cancer? But why wouldn't she tell me? She didn't want to worry you. You said you were busy with your promotion and recovering from your breakup. She thought she was protecting you. Protecting me? I repeated disbelievingly, by excluding me from something this important? I told them we should tell you, Caleb said, but Mom was firm. She wanted one normal Christmas before everything changed. That's why Martha was there. She's been helping Mom with appointments and stuff since she found out. She's had cancer herself, so she's been a guide through all this. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, trying to process this information. My mother had cancer, and I hadn't known. She had been facing this huge challenge while I was feeling sorry for myself over a seat at the dinner table? Why didn't anyone say anything when I left? I asked, my voice small. Mom was upset, but didn't want to make a scene. Dad was trying to keep things normal for her sake. Then when the streaming cut off and Dad talked to you, well, he didn't want to tell you about Mom's diagnosis that way. He was going to drive to your hotel this morning. And the house payments? Did you know I was covering half of that? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Not the exact amount, but I knew you helped. What I didn't know until last night was that Dad had to take early retirement because of his heart condition last year, and they've been struggling more than they let on. The medical bills are already piling up, even with insurance. Each new piece of information was another part of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. My parents' pride had stopped them from being honest about their money situation, just as it had kept them from telling me about my mother's cancer diagnosis. I need some time to think, I said finally. Tell Mom and Dad I'm safe, and tell Mom I'll call her later today. Will you come back to the house? I don't know yet. I need to process all this. After hanging up, I sat still staring at the wall. The story I had built about my family's treatment of me was being rewritten in real time. Yes, they had excluded me from the dinner table, but not because they valued me less. Instead, they had been trying, in their misguided way, to create a normal Christmas while making room for Martha, who had been apparently my mother's support system through her initial diagnosis and treatment planning. I opened my email and found a long message from Martha explaining in detail how she had become involved with my mother's care and apologizing for taking my seat at dinner. I had no idea they hadn't told you about Margaret's diagnosis. I would have never agreed to come if I'd known. The last email was from my mother, sent at 3 a.m. Jordan, I'm sorry for everything. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I've hurt you deeply. Whatever you decide to do about the financial help, please know that I love you. I'm sorry I haven't shown it better. Mom. I closed my laptop and stood up, moving to the window to look out at the Christmas Day activity below. Families walking together, carrying gifts, laughing. All the normal holiday scenes I had driven 6 hours hoping to be part of. The anger that had fueled my actions the previous night was mostly gone, replaced by a complicated mix of hurt, concern, and lingering resentment. My family had been wrong to exclude me from both the table and the truth about my mother's health. But my revengeful financial cutoff, while emotionally satisfying at the moment, now seemed too much, given the context I hadn't known. I picked up my phone again and went to my banking app. I unfroze the house payment, but left the other payments on hold. Then I logged back into the streaming service and reset the password, sending the new one to Caleb's phone. These were small gestures, first steps toward whatever would come next. I wasn't ready to fully forgive the years of being pushed aside and taken for granted,
but neither could I ignore my mother's illness or my family's genuine need. With a new clarity, I began to pack my overnight bag. It was time to return to my parents' house, not with the desperate hope for approval that had driven me there initially, but with the strength to speak my truth while still offering support where it was truly needed. This Christmas had not gone as planned, but perhaps it was exactly the disruption my family needed to finally start being honest with each other. The drive back to my parents' house was short, but felt huge. I had left the previous evening as an angry daughter determined to cut ties. I was returning as... I wasn't entirely sure who I was returning as, but someone different. Someone with new information and a determination to have long overdue conversations. I parked in the driveway rather than on the street, a small way of asserting my place in the family. As I approached the front door, I could see movement through the windows. People in the living room, the flickering light of the television. I knocked, feeling strangely like a visitor rather than a family member. My father opened the door, surprise showing on his face before he hid it with a hesitant smile. "Jordan, you came back? We need to talk," I said simply. "All of us?" He nodded and stepped aside to let me in. In the living room, my mother sat in her usual armchair, looking more fragile than I had noticed the day before. Brooke was on the couch, while Caleb and Mia sat on the floor near the Christmas tree. Martha was noticeably absent. "Jordan." My mother started to rise, but I gestured for her to stay seated. "I think we should have a family meeting," I said, remaining standing. "There are things that need to be said." "If this is about last night," Brooke began, but Caleb cut her off with a sharp look. "Let her speak," he said quietly. I took a deep breath. I know about Mom's diagnosis. Martha texted me, and Caleb filled in some details. I understand now why she was at dinner last night, but what I don't understand is why none of you told me something so important. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to worry you. You've been working so hard, and with the breakup with Liam..." "That wasn't your decision to make. I'm not a child who needs protection from hard truths. I'm your daughter, and I deserve to know that my mother has cancer." My father stepped forward. "We thought we were doing the right thing. You're always so busy, and we didn't want to burden you." "Being included in important family matters isn't a burden, Dad. It's a basic right. You didn't protect me. You excluded me. Just like you excluded me from the dinner table last night." Brooke shifted uncomfortably. "That was just a seating arrangement. You're making it into something bigger than it was." "It is something bigger," insisted. "It's a pattern. I've always been the one who's expected to understand, to make allowances, to sit in the kitchen while everyone else gets a place at the table, literally and figuratively." "That's not fair," my father protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "What's not fair is that I've been financially supporting this family for years without recognition or appreciation. What's not fair is finding out from a neighbor that my mother has cancer. What's not fair is driving 6 hours through a blizzard to be treated like an afterthought." My words hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken hurt. To my surprise, it was my mother who broke the silence. "You're right," she said softly. "We've taken you for granted, Jordan. I see that now, and I'm deeply sorry." She looked around at the rest of the family. "We all owe Jordan an apology. She's been generous with her time, her money, and her love, and we haven't returned that properly." My father looked down at his hands. "The financial help, it's been more essential than you know. After my heart scare last year, the medical bills, and early retirement, we would have lost the house without your help. And now with Mom's treatment costs, things are going to be even tighter." "You should have told me," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I would have helped anyway, but I needed to be asked, not just expected to provide without being acknowledged." "I was jealous," Brooke said suddenly, surprising everyone.
You've always been the successful one, the smart one with the great career and the financial stability. It was easier to make your contribution seem small than admit I was envious of what you've accomplished. Her unexpected honesty momentarily left me speechless. This was more openness than Brooke had shown in years. I don't want your envy. I just want to be treated with the same respect you'd give to any other adult. I want a place at the table, both literally and figuratively. My mother nodded, wiping away tears. We can do better. I promise. We can do better.
I've unfrozen the house payment, I told them. But going forward, we need to set some boundaries and expectations. I'm happy to help, but it needs to be discussed openly, not just assumed. That's more than fair, my father agreed. I turned to my mother. And I want to know everything about your diagnosis and treatment plan. No more protecting me from the truth. She nodded. It's stage 2 breast cancer. The outlook is actually quite good with treatment. I start chemotherapy next week, then surgery in the spring, possibly followed by radiation. Martha has been through it herself, which is why she's been so helpful. I should have been told, I said, my voice cracking slightly. I would have wanted to be here for you from the beginning. I know that now, she admitted. I was wrong to keep it from you. Caleb stood up. Since we're having honest conversations, there's something else you should know, Jord. The ski trip you mentioned last night, we weren't excluding you. It's the weekend of your big industry conference in New York. You told us months ago you couldn't make it. I blinked, trying to remember. He was right. I had declined because of the conference, which I had completely forgotten about in the emotion of the moment. Huh, I said, feeling a flush of embarrassment. I forgot about that. We should have been clearer about the New Year's gathering, too, my father added. We assumed you wouldn't want to make another long drive so soon, but we should have explicitly invited you. The conversation continued for over an hour, each of us sharing perspectives and hurts that had been buried for years. There were more tears, some raised voices, moments of defending ourselves, but also genuine apologies and promises to change. By the time we finished talking, it was nearly dinner time. The Christmas dinner leftovers were retrieved from the refrigerator, and this time we all sat at the dining room table together, making room by bringing in extra chairs from the study. As we ate, the conversation was different from our usual holiday discussions. Instead of shallow small talk and Brooke's domination, we spoke about real things. My mother's treatment schedule, my father's adjustment to retirement, Caleb's thesis progress, and yes, my recent promotion and the projects I was working on. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly seen by my family. The hurt wasn't magically healed, and I knew we would have more difficult conversations ahead, but it was a beginning, a new foundation built on honesty rather than assumptions and resentment. After dinner, we exchanged the gifts that had been left untouched from the night before. The expensive presents I had brought were received with genuine appreciation, but it was the handmade card my mother gave me that brought tears to my eyes. Inside, she had written, "To my daughter, whose strength and success inspire me every day. I'm sorry I haven't told you that enough. Love, Mom." When Martha stopped by briefly that evening to check on my mother, there was no awkwardness. Instead, I thanked her for being there for my mom when I couldn't be, and for having the courage to send me that text that changed everything. Families are complicated, she said with a knowing smile, but worth fighting for. As she left, I realized she was right. My family was deeply flawed, as all families are in their own ways, but they were mine and I was theirs, not because of the financial support I provided or the obligations of blood, but because despite everything, we were choosing to try again, to see each other more clearly, and to build something better than what we had before. The rest of Christmas Day unfolded in a way I never could have predicted when I first arrived at my parents' house. After our intense but necessary family meeting, a strange calm settled over us all. It wasn't the false peace of ignored problems,
but something more real. The quiet relief that comes after a storm has cleared the air. My father suggested we rearrange the dining room table to make it more inclusive, a small but important gesture that didn't go unnoticed. We added chairs from around the house, creating a mismatched but welcoming setting where everyone had space.
For Christmas dinner, we heated up leftovers and sat together, passing dishes family style rather than being served individually as we'd always done before. "I've been thinking," my mother said as we ate, "about how much energy I've spent keeping up appearances instead of focusing on what really matters." She looked frail but determined in the soft light of the dining room. The knowledge of her cancer diagnosis changed how I saw her, making me notice the subtle signs I'd missed before. The slight weight loss, the occasional moments of discomfort, the tiredness behind her eyes. "The cancer diagnosis has been terrifying," she continued, "but it's also been clarifying. I don't want to waste any more time on meaningless traditions or worrying what the neighbors think. Except Martha," Caleb joked gently. "She's earned her place." We all laughed, the tension easing further. "I'm scared," my mother admitted, her voice wavering. "The treatment sounds almost as frightening as the disease." It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen her, this woman who had always presented a perfect image to the world. "You don't have to face it alone," I said, reaching for her hand across the table. "I can take some time off work, be here for the first rounds of chemo." "You do that after how we treated you?" The surprise in her voice was another painful reminder of how low her expectations of our relationship had fallen. "That's what family does," I replied simply. "The real kind, not the pretend version we've been playing at." We talked openly about fears that night. My mother's fear of cancer, my father's fear of losing her, Brooke's fear of never measuring up, Caleb's fear of disappointing everyone, and my fear of always being on the outside looking in. The honesty was uncomfortable at times, but also freeing. When it came time to open gifts, the expensive presents I had brought seemed less important than the conversations we were having. Still, my father's eyes widened at the rare American Civil War book, and my mother ran her fingers lovingly over the designer handbag. "These are too much, Jordan," she protested. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "I think I was trying to buy my way into being valued. I don't need to do that anymore." The healing process had only just begun, but I could already feel the difference. The initial pain of confrontation and truth-telling was giving way to something healthier. We were seeing each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. Over the next few days, I extended my stay in Maplewood, going with my mother to a pre-treatment consultation where I asked questions she had been afraid to voice. I helped my father organize their medical bills and insurance paperwork, setting up a system he could maintain after I returned to Denver. I also had several honest conversations with Brooke, whose competitiveness with me had affected our relationship since childhood. Without the distraction of trying to win our parents' favor, we discovered we actually had things in common: a dry sense of humor, a love of obscure documentaries, a tendency to overthink. "I always thought you had it all figured out," she confessed during a late-night talk. "The perfect career, the financial stability, the confidence. It made me feel like a failure in comparison. Trust me, I don't have it all figured out. I've just gotten good at looking like I do. And I spent years trying to buy our parents' approval, so maybe I'm the one with the bigger issues." We laughed together, a rare moment of sisterly connection. Before returning to Denver, I sat down with my parents to establish clear boundaries around financial support. I would continue helping with my mother's medical expenses, but scaled back other assistance, encouraging them to develop a sustainable budget. The conversation was uncomfortable but necessary, and I was proud of us all for having it. "We should have been more honest about our situation," my father admitted. "Pride is expensive." "So is resentment," I replied. "I'd rather know the truth, even when it's difficult." 6 months later, much had changed. My mother was halfway through her treatment, her prognosis good despite the toll chemotherapy had taken on her body.
I had visited monthly, coordinating with Brooke and Caleb to ensure someone was always there for important appointments. My relationship with my family had evolved in ways I never expected. We had established a weekly video call where updates were shared honestly rather than filtered through a lens of perfection. My father had started sending me articles about financial markets, a small acknowledgement of my expertise he had previously overlooked. Brooke had recommended me for a speaking engagement at her company, a gesture of professional respect that meant more than any Christmas gift. Caleb had been the most consistent supporter through it all, the bridge between my new boundaries and my parents' adjustment to them. You know, when you walked out on Christmas Eve, he told me during a recent visit, it was like someone finally disrupted a script we'd been mindlessly following for years. It was uncomfortable as hell, but necessary. The profound lesson I carried from that Christmas Eve wasn't what I expected. I had walked in hoping for appreciation and walked out demanding respect. What I discovered in the aftermath was something more valuable than either: authenticity. True family isn't built on perfect holiday dinners or who sits where at a table. It isn't maintained through financial support or obligation. Real family is forged in honesty. Even when that honesty hurts initially, it grows stronger through challenges faced together, through seeing each other's flaws and loving anyway. It requires boundaries as much as it requires generosity, truth-telling as much as forgiveness. My mother's cancer forced us to confront our mortality, and in doing so, the temporary nature of our grievances. Did it really matter who sat where at dinner when we could lose each other at any moment? Of course not. But it did matter that we all felt valued, included, and heard. I'd spent years equating financial support with love, using my success as a way to purchase a place in my family. They had spent years taking that support for granted while keeping me at arm's length emotionally. Breaking that unhealthy cycle was the best gift we could have given each other. As I look ahead to next Christmas, I know it will be different. Not perfect. Perfect isn't the goal anymore, but authentic. We'll sit at a table where everyone has a place. We'll speak truths instead of platitudes, and we'll value each other's presence more than presence. And if you're watching this and recognizing your own family patterns, I hope you find the courage to disrupt them when necessary. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Being honest isn't cruel, it's brave. And sometimes walking away is what makes coming back together possible. I'd love to hear your stories of family transformations or challenging holiday moments in the comments below. Has a difficult confrontation ever led to positive change in your relationships? Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need permission to set their own boundaries this holiday season. Thank you for being part of my journey, and I wish you authentic connections with those you love during the holidays and beyond.